It begins without warning, in the quietest moment of the night, when most of the world is asleep and nothing seems like it is about to change. There is no explosion, no announcement, no visible signal that something extraordinary is happening. Cities remain silent, highways empty, lights flickering in apartment windows where people drift through dreams, unaware that by the time morning comes, the meaning of wealth will be completely rewritten. Somewhere, deep inside the systems that control global finance, something shifts. Numbers begin to change. Balances rise. At first, it is subtle, almost invisible. A few accounts update, then more, then all of them. Savings accounts, checking accounts, hidden offshore funds, forgotten digital wallets, investment portfolios that have not been opened in years. Every number begins to climb, multiplying beyond logic, beyond expectation, beyond anything that should be possible. Millions turn into billions. Thousands become fortunes. Debts disappear, swallowed by numbers too large to make sense of. And it does not stop. By the time the first alarm clocks begin to ring across the world, every single person, regardless of where they live, who they are, or what they have done, wakes up as one of the richest individuals on the planet. At first, no one understands it. A man in a small apartment checks his phone, expecting to see the same low balance he has been living with for years. Instead, he freezes. The screen does not make sense. He refreshes it again and again, convinced it is a glitch, a mistake, a temporary error that will correct itself at any moment. But it does not. The number remains, unreal, massive, life-changing. In another part of the world, a woman who has spent decades building her business stares at her accounts in disbelief, realizing that everything she has worked for, every risk, every sacrifice, has suddenly been overshadowed by something she did not earn, did not expect, and cannot explain. Within minutes, messages begin to spread. People call each other, voices shaking, asking the same question over and over again. Do you see it too? Social media erupts. Screens fill with screenshots, videos, live reactions. Millions of people showing the same thing. Unimaginable wealth. Everywhere. Banks are overwhelmed instantly. Systems slow down under the pressure of global access as people log in simultaneously, trying to confirm what they are seeing. Customer support lines collapse. Automated messages replace human responses. There are no answers, because there is no explanation. Governments scramble to respond, issuing statements urging calm, promising investigations, suggesting that the situation is temporary. But even as they speak, even as officials attempt to reassure the public, their own accounts reflect the same impossible change. No one is excluded. No one is left behind. For the first time in human history, wealth is no longer something rare. It is universal. And that is when the first crack appears. Because wealth, by definition, only has meaning when not everyone has it. The first hours feel like a celebration. People rush outside, laughing, shouting, hugging strangers, as if the world has just been saved from something invisible. Plans are made instantly. Dreams that once felt distant suddenly feel immediate, reachable, inevitable. People talk about quitting their jobs, about traveling the world, about buying homes, cars, experiences they once believed were out of reach. And many act on it immediately. By midday, offices begin to empty. Emails go unanswered. Meetings are abandoned. Entire companies find themselves without employees as people simply walk away, convinced they no longer need to work. Why would they? Money is no longer a problem. But the system they are leaving behind was never built for a world like this. Stores begin to fill beyond capacity. People rush to buy, not out of necessity, but out of excitement, curiosity, the sudden ability to say yes to everything they once had to refuse. Luxury items disappear first. Cars, jewelry, high-end electronics, designer clothing. Then everything else follows. Shelves empty. Warehouses are drained. Delivery systems collapse under demand that multiplies faster than anything they were designed to handle. prices begin to rise almost immediately, not because of greed, but because of reality. When everyone can afford anything, nothing remains affordable. Restaurants fill within hours, reservations meaningless, lines stretching around entire blocks. Hotels are booked out worldwide in a matter of minutes. Flights are purchased faster than airlines can process them, creating a backlog that turns travel into chaos. And still, people keep spending, because for the first time they can. But supply does not change overnight. Production does not suddenly increase. Workers are not at their jobs. Factories slow down, then stop entirely as employees choose not to return. Why work long hours when money is no longer a necessity? Why continue routines that were built around survival when survival itself no longer depends on effort? The question spreads quietly at first, then louder. Why work at all? Within days, the global economy begins to fracture, not with a dramatic collapse, but with a slow, undeniable breakdown of function. Systems that relied on incentive, on need, on imbalance begin to fail one by one. Hospitals struggle as staff fail to show up for shifts, not out of cruelty, but out of a sudden loss of urgency. Schools close as teachers choose to pursue lives they had once postponed. Public services become inconsistent, unreliable, stretched thin, because wealth has removed something fundamental, the reason to continue. And in the middle of it all, people begin to notice something unexpected. The feeling of being rich fades faster than anyone imagined. At first, it is overwhelming, intoxicating, almost unreal. But as hours turn into days, and days into a new kind of normal, the excitement begins to dull. The numbers in accounts remain high, unchanged, but the emotional impact begins to shrink. Because when everyone is rich, no one is. Luxury becomes ordinary. Excess becomes invisible. The things that once defined success lose their meaning because they are no longer rare, no longer earned, no longer limited. A mansion is no longer impressive when everyone can have one. A private jet loses its value when the skies are full of them. Exclusivity disappears, and with it, the identity people built around wealth. For some, this creates a strange kind of emptiness, because they realize that money was never just about what it could buy. It was about what it represented: status, achievement, difference. And now all of that is gone. The world begins to shift in ways no one expected. Not just economically, but psychologically. People who spent their entire lives chasing financial success find themselves lost, unsure of what to pursue next. Without scarcity, without competition, without the need to earn, direction becomes unclear. And in that uncertainty, a new kind of tension begins to rise. Not about money, but about meaning. Because if everyone has everything, what is left to strive for? The question lingers, growing heavier with each passing day, as the world continues to adjust to a reality it was never designed to handle. And slowly, quietly, it becomes clear. This was never just about becoming rich. It was about what happens when value itself disappears. It does not collapse in a single moment. There is no dramatic breaking point, no single day when the world simply stops and everyone understands that something has gone wrong. Instead, the change spreads slowly, like a quiet crack moving through glass, almost invisible at first, but impossible to ignore once it reaches the surface. At the beginning, people try to hold on to the old rules. Banks attempt to stabilize the situation, introducing limits, temporary restrictions, emergency measures designed to control spending and restore balance. Governments speak of reforms, of new economic models, of systems that can adapt to a world where money is no longer scarce. But every solution runs into the same problem. Value no longer exists in the way it used to. When everyone has unlimited wealth, currency becomes meaningless. Prices rise not because of inflation in the traditional sense, but because there is no longer a real connection between cost and effort. A simple meal begins to cost more than a luxury item once did, not because it is rare, but because producing it requires people who are no longer motivated by money. And motivation becomes the real crisis. Factories remain silent, not because they are broken, but because no one feels the need to operate them. Offices stand empty, lights off, systems running without purpose. Entire industries begin to dissolve, not through destruction, but through abandonment. At first, people believe this is temporary. Pause. A moment of adjustment before a new system emerges. But days turn into weeks, and the absence of structure begins to create something far more dangerous than poverty ever did. Instability. Without consistent production, supplies begin to shrink. Food becomes harder to find, not because there is no money to buy it, but because fewer people are willing to grow it, transport it, distribute it. Energy systems become unreliable as maintenance is neglected. Infrastructure begins to weaken, slowly but steadily, as the people responsible for keeping it running choose not to return. The world does not run on money. It runs on effort, and effort without necessity becomes optional. That realization changes how people see wealth itself, because for the first time, they understand that money was never the true resource. People were time, skill, discipline, cooperation. Those were the real foundations of the world they had built. And now, those foundations are starting to disappear. Communities begin to react in different ways. In some places, small groups form agreements not based on money, but on contribution. People begin trading effort instead of currency, offering services, sharing resources, rebuilding a sense of structure in a world where the old system has failed. These communities become stable, even peaceful, because they rediscover something simple: purpose. In other places, the opposite happens. Without clear rules, without incentives, without shared responsibility, chaos begins to grow. Not violent at first, but disorganized, unpredictable, fragmented. People take what they want, not out of desperation, but out of habit, out of the lingering idea that ownership still matters in a world where it no longer functions the same way. And slowly, tension begins to rise between those who adapt and those who do not. Because even without money, inequality returns. Not in wealth, but in usefulness. People who have skills, who can build, repair, create, organize, suddenly become valuable again. Not because they are paid, but because they are needed. And those without direction, without contribution, begin to feel lost, disconnected from a world that no longer rewards possession, but demands participation. It is a shift no one expected, because becoming rich was supposed to remove struggle. Instead, it revealed a different kind of struggle, one that cannot be solved with numbers, one that cannot be transferred, multiplied, or stored. The struggle to matter. As months pass, the world begins to reshape itself around this new reality. Large cities shrink in importance as centralized systems fail to maintain stability. Smaller communities grow stronger, more self-sufficient, more connected. People begin to move not toward opportunity, but toward meaning, searching for places where they can be useful, where they can belong. The idea of success changes. It is no longer about what you own. It becomes about what you can do. And for the first time in generations, people begin to measure each other not by wealth, but by contribution, by reliability, by presence. Some resist this change. They cling to the old identity of being rich, even though it no longer carries weight. They continue to accumulate, to collect, to surround themselves with objects that once symbolized power, even as those symbols fade into irrelevance. But over time, even that becomes difficult to maintain, because objects do not sustain themselves. They require care, maintenance, tension, and without people willing to provide those things, even the most expensive possessions begin to decay, slowly losing their value, not in price, but in function. The illusion of endless wealth begins to fade, and in its place, something far more real emerges. A world where value must be created again, not through money, but through action. And in that world, people begin to understand something they had forgotten. That meaning was never something you could buy. It was something you had to build. The transformation is not perfect. It is not smooth. There are losses, failures, places where the system breaks down completely before something new can take its place. But there is also growth, adaptation, a slow and steady movement toward a different kind of balance. One that does not rely on scarcity to function. One that does not depend on inequality to create motivation. One that asks a different question. Not how much do you have, but what do you give? And as this new world begins to take shape, as people adjust to a life where money has lost its power, a final realization settles in, quiet but undeniable. Wealth was never about having everything. It was about having something that others did not. And when that disappears, when everyone becomes rich at the same time, the only thing left that truly matters is not what you own, but what you choose to become.